There's a ridiculously wide multitude of jutsus that are used throughout the entirety of Naruto's story. Now, some of these jutsus are used hundreds, if not thousands of times. However, some of these jutsus, in fact, the wide majority of these jutsus are used rather sparingly. See, well, yes, when people tell you to name 3 jutsus from Naruto, you're probably going to name the ones that are used most commonly, like the Rasengan, Chidori. However, because the power system in Naruto is as diverse as the cast is large, the vast majority of jutsu that we end up seeing in the Naruto universe are used less than 5 times, with a rather significant portion of the entire list of jutsus used in the Naruto universe only ever being used 1 time. And rather interestingly, while the list of jutsus that have only ever been used the 1 time is somewhere between 50 and 60 entries long, seemingly one of the main reasons that a jutsu is only ever used 1 time is because, quite frankly, it's too powerful to be used twice. See, one would assume that if a jutsu is only ever used once over the course of a 700 chapter manga, it would be because either the cast outgrew that jutsu or because the jutsu wasn't deemed to be all that useful. But actually, it's seemingly the opposite. See, the vast majority of jutsus that are only ever used 1 time are jutsus that are so powerful that if they were to be used on a somewhat common basis, well, either the world would be destroyed or there would be no plot to follow, as any problem could be immediately solved by spamming said jutsu. And thus today, I want to talk about those jutsu, those prolifically powerful 1-time only use jutsu. I want to talk about what makes them unique, what makes them powerful, and who used them. And more importantly than anything, I want to narrow down amongst these 1-time use jutsu which was the strongest of all time. All that is to say, today we're discussing single-serving shinobi because today we're talking the top 10 strongest 1-time use jutsus of all time. But before we get to talking about the shinobi equivalents of an elephant gun, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you guys are looking for one additional NC Hammer 23 video every single week, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the 4th wall link in my description below. Jiraiya is cracking the code of how to get Naruto to summon Gamabunta. The answer is a cavern that's several thousand feet deep and filled with spikes. But before we get into all that, today we gotta talk about our favorite recurring sponsor to the page, Raycon. The holidays are over. We're into the new year, which means it's the perfect time to upgrade your gear. If you're getting into a fitness routine or trying to train more consistently, high quality audio is the best way to ensure that you stick to those goals. And I know personally, my Raycon open earbuds have been instrumental in me crushing my New Year's goals. They're a game changer for workouts. They don't block out all of the noise around me like traditional earbuds, so I can still hear what's going on around me while lifting or running or just working around the house, all the while maintaining my high quality music or podcast listening fidelity, which means I get to be safe and aware while also locked into things like the newest episode of Otaku's Anonymous. And right now, Raycon is ringing in the new year with a sale, so there's never been a better time to grab you a pair of their new open earbuds. So these open earbuds sit right outside your ear canal. They're really light and the ear hook rotates for maximum flexibility and comfort. I've not only worn these earbuds at the gym while drenched in sweat, but also out on high intensity runs and they never budge. So what are you waiting for? Join Raycon's 3 million customers who all appreciate that the sound quality of Raycon is just as good as all of their competitors at half the price. And if you don't like them, well, Raycon offers a 30-day happiness guarantee. So what are you waiting for? The essential open earbuds are here to help you crush your New Year's goals. Go to buyraycon.com/NCHammer23open to get 20% off site-wide. Thank you, Raycon, for sponsoring today's video. So before we dive into this list, I want to lay down a couple of rules. When I say 1-time use jutsus, I mean jutsus that are only ever used once. Not used once by one person and then used by another person once. I'm talking about jutsus that have only ever been shown 1 time. I'm also only talking about manga canon 1-time use jutsus, because every single filler arc introduces a litany of new jutsus that are only ever used a couple of times. Looking at you, village hidden in the stars. Oh, it's radiation power. I don't know why I'm being mean. It's a fun arc. So manga canon only ever used the 1 time. Those are our rules moving forward. So with that understood, let's get into our list with our number 10 spot. Coming up at number 10 on our list, ranking the most powerful jutsus that have only ever been used 1 time, we have the Bringer of Darkness jutsu. This was a technique used by Hashirama in his battle against Hiruzen alongside Tobirama and Orochimaru in the Konoha Crush arc. It's a genjutsu that casts who's ever unfortunate enough to be hit by it into what's described as the bottom of a very deep hole. That is to say that it makes the person being affected by the genjutsu effectively blind, making who's ever been affected by it incredibly vulnerable to attack, as they basically have no way to defend themselves. At least they wouldn't if they weren't a Hokage level threat. See, because, well, yes, when we see this technique originally used by Hashirama Hashirama on Hiruzen. Hiruzen and his two shadow clones do struggle with it for a little bit. However, as the Bringer of Darkness technique does only technically affect your eyesight, if you have any sensory abilities that allow for you to track the movement of chakra without the usage of your eyes, or a particularly keen sense of smell or hearing, you can still track your opponents. And Hiruzen displays the ability to do literally exactly that, as he uses his sense of smell to launch a counterattack against Hashirama and Tobirama, getting his hands on them so he can use Reaper Death Seal against them. However, if Hashirama was brought back at full strength and used this jutsu in combination with something like shadow clones or long-reaching wood attacks, instead of just running up to try and strike Hiruzen and his shadow clones, Hiruzen probably would have died. Now, that being said, Hashirama probably wouldn't have to rely on using something like Bringer of Darkness technique in the first place if he was brought back at full strength in a battle against Hiruzen, but that's neither here nor there. But still, the ability to plunge your opponent into complete and total blackness is a fantastic way to get a leg up on them in combat. It's kind of a shame we never see this genjutsu used again, especially when you consider the fact that we saw it used by somebody who notoriously doesn't really use anything outside of ninjutsu. Like, yes, obviously Senju means 1,000 tasks, and the Senju are known for being incredibly well-rounded ninja, but looking back at it now, seeing one of the more powerful genjutsus of all time used by Hashirama is a bit odd. But because it does have weaknesses, like somebody's sensory ability or ability to smell whether or not you've showered this week, it's gonna have to get our last place number 10 spot. But speaking of abilities that got something to do with eyes, let's get to our number 9 spot. Because coming up on our list of ranking the top 10 strongest jutsus that were only ever used once in Naruto, we have Izanami. Now, this is kind of a contentious pick, because if you count the backstory of Izanami and how it was used against members of the Uchiha clan who are trying to change their destiny with Izanagi, we have technically seen this jutsu used multiple times. However, all of those cutaways where we see individual members of the Uchiha clan from the past have Izanami used on them, that's all technically filler. It's cool filler, it's important filler, it's a nice little backstory that doesn't really take anything away from the manga story. In fact, it kind of adds to it, but technically there's only ever been one canonical usage of Izanami, and that was the usage of Izanami that Itachi used against Kabuto. And probably for good reason, because Izanami is highly situational. See, while yes, Izanami's counterpoint, Izanagi, is a ridiculously powerful jutsu that allows for you to place a genjutsu on the entire world and then make that genjutsu a reality, allowing for you to rewrite the concept of your death and make yourself an entirely new, non-dead body, the kind of jutsu that would be massively useful in a myriad of different situations, whether that be while you're trying to fight against a 17-year-old boy who's pissed that you forced his older brother into eradicating his entire clan, or if you just want to program your eye for the eventuality that you die against your boyfriend to bring you back to life a little bit later so you can crawl away to some cave to die in. However, Izanami is not nearly as useful. See, because in order to use Izanami against somebody, that somebody you're trying to use Izanami against has to be actively trying to change their fate. Now, usually, at least within the context of the Uchiha history, the person who Izanami is being used on is trying to change their fate by trying to rewrite their own death. And since doing so came at the cost of a Sharingan, which the Uchiha viewed as holy relics, essentially, Izanami was created to make sure that people would stop doing that, even though Izanami comes at the cost of Sharingan. However, fortunately, because you are kind of able to bend the rules around Izanami a little bit, if somebody like Kabuto is actively trying to morph themselves into a mixture of Orochimaru in every experimentation they've ever done, well, then you can say that Kabuto is trying to change his fate from being the head of the Konoha orphanage to a snake man, unless you can put him in an infinite loop until he comes to the realization that he's not meant to be a snake man. And that's what makes Izanami so interesting. It's incredibly unique so far as jutsus go. Essentially, while battling against somebody, or maybe even not while battling against somebody, you have to mark 3 moments in time. And then you activate Izanami, and you force that person to live through those 3 moments in time, time and time again. Until eventually they learn the lesson that trying to augment their fate, well, is just not a good idea. And thus, not until that person has made a legitimate change in themselves are they able to break out of that time loop. And that's about as subjective as genjutsu or really any jutsu in the Naruto universe gets. Like, how can genuine character growth be measured by a jutsu? We can't say. But what we can say is that it worked on Kabuto. So I guess the Sasuke, say thank you to your brother, at least once you die, because he technically faded into ashes before Kabuto saved your life. But whatever. But on account of the fact that Izanami is not only highly situational, but can only, in most circumstances, be used twice by one person, I'm gonna have to give it our number 9 spot. But since we're talking about Itachi, might as well talk about somebody else from his clan. Because coming up at number 8 on our list of ranking the strongest jutsus in Naruto that were only used once, we have Sage Art Storm Release Light Fang. Now, this is a jutsu that was used by Jubidara, a jutsu that allowed for Jubidara to fire a purple laser out of his mouth that was so powerful it was able to cut a black chakra rod in half. And consider the fact that that black chakra rod was made out of a truth seeker orb, which are notoriously impossible to destroy unless you have access to crazy high-level senjutsu chakra. This is one of the most impressive destructive feats we've ever seen in Naruto, as really only 2 people over the course of Naruto have ever shown the ability to destroy a truth seeker orb, and those 2 people were Madara and Sasuke. Outside of the fact that this mouth laser has the ability to cut through basically anything, it was also one of the first instances of a certifiable light speed attack in the Naruto universe. And as it's an attack that travels at the speed of light, it's said to be impossible to dodge. You know, unless you're Naruto or Sasuke. But considering the fact that this is an attack that travels at the speed of light and has the ability to cut through anything, it's highly fortunate that Madara didn't get access to this jutsu until the majority of the Shinobi Alliance had already been ruled out of the fight. Because if Madara did have access to this jutsu when there was 80,000 Shinobi running at him, there really would have been nothing to stop him from firing off a waist-level mouth laser that wasted the large section of the Shinobi Alliance, in a real ghost ship kind of way to begin the 4th Great Shinobi World War, which wouldn't have been all that great. Kind of like Ghost Ship, which I'm realizing I reference too often. But because this jutsu was only ever used the one time, and all that it accomplished was cutting a Truth Seeker orb in half, I'm gonna have to give it our number 8 spot. But don't worry, we're not done with Madara just quite yet. Because coming up on our list at number 7, ranking the strongest jutsus in Naruto that were only used once, we have Fire Release, Great Fire Annihilation. See, this technique is considered to be the pinnacle of Uchiha Fire Release, a technique that we only ever saw used by Madara at the beginning of the 4th Great Shinobi World War, that like with any fire release that's channeled through the mouth requires that chakra be needed inside of a shinobi. That chakra is then needed into fire release and fired out through the mouth. And while in a sense this technique is just kind of the highest level variation we've ever seen of the Great Fireball technique, which every Uchiha needs to know, it does have its own individual name. And the one time we see Madara use it is the only time we ever see anybody use it. And thank God for that. See, because Fire Release Great Fire Annihilation is so much more than just the highest level variation of the Great Fireball technique. This technique allows for somebody to generate a literal sea of flames. A sea of flames that would have turned the entire Shinobi Alliance into barbecue if several, and I mean a dozen or so high-level water ninjutsu users didn't work together to beat back the flames. And without the combined effort of an entire garrison of high-level water release users, Madara would have been able to cover the entirety of the Shinobi Alliance in flames. From, mind you, like half a mile away. That's how much fire he was producing. It was hundreds of meters wide and was fired from hundreds of meters away. With this attack, Madara very easily displayed that he could cover an entire village in fire in the blink of an eye. It's just fortunate for the Shinobi Alliance that this jutsu was fired on even ground, which means that the flames could be met head on with water release, which obviously fire release is weak to. So because technically this jutsu didn't accomplish for anything outside of allowing a couple of water ninjutsu users to feel good about themselves, for a second, I'm gonna have to give it our number 7 spot. But since we're talking about massive seas of fires and explosions, we might as well get to our number 6 spot, because coming up in our number 6 spot, ranking the strongest jutsus in Naruto that were only ever used once, we have the Paper Person of God technique. AKA that time Konan made 600 billion explosive tags. See, Konan, who fully understood that at some point in time, Obito was gonna make his way to the Hidden Rain Village to try and seal Nagato's Rinnegan eyes out of his corpse, decided she had nothing better to do than completely overprepare. And as Konan was fully cognizant of all of Obito's Kamui weaknesses, like the fact that he could only be intangible for a couple minutes at a time, and that if he tried to warp himself away to a different location or to the Kamui dimension, while he was trying to teleport himself away, he couldn't be intangible. And therefore Konan decided that the best way to deal with Obito's Kamui would be 600 billion paper bombs. 600 billion paper bombs, which would explode for longer than Obito would be able to stay intangible. And therefore, if Obito was dropped into a ravine of 600 billion paper bombs that were going to explode for 10 plus minutes, eventually he would lose his intangibility and would be decimated by, you know, the 600 billion explosions. But it gets better. Konan obviously is able to control all explosive tags and the paper that makes up her body, and therefore Konan is able to make an entire landscape out of paper tags, which she can then disguise as things like an ocean or mountains, or even a cityscape. But when you eventually do walk onto her actual ocean of explosions, because she's able to control all of her explosive tags and her paper body, she can just open up a gigantic explosive tag ravine under you. And if you can't fly, well, have fun falling into the explosive cavern. And since, like I've said 1,000 times already, Konan is able to control all of the paper that she creates, she can also stick all of the explosive tags to you as you fall into a ravine of 600 billion explosions. And this technique is so ridiculously powerful that it would have killed Obito if it weren't for the invention of Izanagi, Kishimoto's greatest foil. And therefore, considering the fact that this jutsu could have and probably should have killed Obito, and the fact that in order to pull off this jutsu in the first place, Konan was harnessing the power of 600 billion explosive tags, undoubtedly level entire villages and maybe entire countries, I'm gonna have to give Paper Person of God our number 6 spot. But on account of the fact that it didn't technically kill anybody or anything and requires an insane amount of prep time, I can't put it higher than our next entry, which is also a big explosion. It's coming up at number 5 on our list of the strongest jutsus in Naruto that were only ever used once. We have Deidara's C0 explosion.
Oh, and what do you mean? Paper Person of God is so much more powerful than Deidara's C0 explosion, and one doesn't require the death of the person using it.
And yes, you're right about all those things. Konan's 600 billion paper bombs are inherently stronger than Deidara's C0 explosion. If you're like, specifically Obito, or just so happen to unfortunately wander into the library of explosive tags that Konan has built. Anybody who can fly, teleport, reverse summon themselves, or protect themselves can probably survive Paper Person of God. It's just that Obito has none of those abilities. The same isn't necessarily true for C0. See, C0, which is only ever used the one time because it literally kills Deidara when he uses it, and then for plot reasons, Deidara doesn't use it again when he's brought back during the 4th Great Shinobi World War because that would have been deeply unfair, has Deidara undoing the stitches on a mouth that's over his heart. Deidara then feeds a large ball of explosive clay to his chest mouth, which gives Deidara access to all of the chakra he's stored in his heart, that he then immediately turns into explosive chakra. The explosive chakra then runs its way through all of Deidara's veins until eventually it hits a breaking point, and that breaking point is when a 10-kilometer wide explosion happens. Now listen, I know Paper Person of God is a massive explosion, but C0 is a 10-kilometer wide explosion in all directions. Now, the nuclear explosions of Hiroshima and Nagasaki had 2-kilometer wide radiuses. And if you're thinking to yourself, wow, so Deidara's explosion was 5 times more powerful? No, it's not just 5 times more powerful. It's roughly 20 times larger. And while yes, Sasuke was able to protect himself from the C0 blast, so Deidara kind of did it for nothing, it did kill Manta, undoubtedly one of the strongest summoning animals we've ever seen in Naruto. So because I believe that Deidara's C0 explosive radius was probably larger than that of Paper Person of God, and because it requires a whole lot less setup, but I guess more giving your life, I'm giving it the number 5 spot. But enough about all these explosions. What happened to precise attacks? Well, that's exactly what we got at our number 4 spot, coming up at number 4 on our list, ranking the strongest jutsus in Naruto that were only ever used once. We have Kamui Shuriken. See, Kamui Shuriken feels like a jutsu that gets brought up all the time as one of the most iconic and powerful jutsus in the entirety of the Naruto universe, and all of those things are correct. However, what's wild is it's only ever used once. Now, this is obviously because Kamui Shuriken was used by DMS Kakashi, and DMS Kakashi was a temporary form granted to Kakashi by Obito, who gave Kakashi, using the last vestiges of his Sage of Six Paths chakra, access to DMS. And therefore, Kakashi was able to tap into one of the strongest Susanos we've ever seen. And with that Susano, and just with his general DMS ability, Kakashi was able to slap Kamui onto, well, basically everything. Whether that be his Raikiri, his own body, gaining the intangibility of Obito, or his gigantic Susanoo Shuriken. By applying Kamui to everything, Kakashi became a genuine top 5 threat in the universe. And none of those Kamui-based jutsus were more intimidating than his Kamui Shuriken. See, because, well, yes, Kakashi's Raikiri has a crazy high kill record. Applying a space-time ninjutsu to a shuriken the size of a school bus that you hurl at your opponent at close to the speed of light is about one of the scariest things you can do in Naruto. See, because even if you do somehow survive being hit by a school bus-sized shuriken, you'll be immediately teleported to the Kamui dimension, a void dimension that Kakashi and I guess Obito at least used to be in control of. Now, obviously, if you have your own space-time ninjutsu, you can leave the Kamui dimension, but if you don't, well, I hope you like occasionally seeing parts of Kakashi's body. Now, obviously, like with a lot of the jutsus on this list, Kamui Shuriken never really ended up doing all that much. However, considering the fact that Kamui Shuriken, if it landed, probably would have killed anybody in the universe in Naruto at that moment in time, Kaguya maybe included, yeah, I'm gonna have to give it our number 4 spot. But I'm getting sick of all of these hypothetically powerful jutsus that never hit their mark. So let's talk about some jutsus that end up leaving a mark, like our number 3 spot. Because coming up at number 3 on our list, ranking the strongest jutsus in Naruto that were only ever used once, we have Night Guy. See, Night Guy, like Datara C0, can only ever be used once because, well, you have to die at the end of it. Unless, of course, you befriended into Jesus and he just so happens to stumble upon your rapidly turning into ash body. See, Night Guy was used by, can you guess who? Might Guy, who after opening to his 8th gate in his battle against one Rinnegan Jubidara, who was able to, using the last vestiges of the power held within the body of the blue bull of the leaf, to enter a 3-point stance and launch himself at Madara with as much force as he could muster. He then, using the force of his launch, throws himself into a leaf hurricane kick. However, this leaf hurricane kick, because it's powered by the power of the 8th gate, and therefore the power of a heart beating so fast that it is literally boiling the blood inside of Might Guy's body, is delivered with a force that is almost incomparable to anything else in Naruto. Because after Might Guy establishes to Madara that he is the greatest taijutsu user of all time, by hitting Madara with things like his morning peacock and his evening elephant, massive blasts of compressed air that Might Guy could launch at his opponent by punching or kicking hard enough, Madara decides, out of respect for Might Guy, he's going to try to block his strongest attack. However, unfortunately for Madara, Might Guy, by using Night Guy, is either moving so fast or has become such a massive object that he is warping space-time. Now, to put some context behind that, everything that has mass warps space-time. And therefore, since hypothetically everything has mass, everything also technically has its own gravity. However, not until we really get up to the size of things like our moon does that gravity become to get noticeable. However, as mass is technically correlated to velocity, objects moving at the speed of light gain infinite mass. And the closer you get to the speed of light, the closer you get to infinite mass. And therefore, Might Guy, with his activation of Night Guy, either became an object with infinite mass moving at the speed of light towards Madara, which is why he was able to warp space-time and make it so Madara couldn't block his attack, or somehow Might Guy's chakra became so incredibly dense through the activation of the 8th gate that it began to simply visibly warp space-time. And while we don't necessarily know what happened, either scenario is absurd. And thus, with the power of a kick that might have carried infinite mass, Might Guy was able to blow away half of Madara's torso. And if it weren't for the fact that Madara was actively the Jinchuriki of the 10 tails and had Hashirama cells, Madara admits that he would have died. And thus, when you start busting out techniques that could feasibly kill a one Rinnegan Jubidara, you're gonna make it into the top 3 of this list. However, unfortunately, even though Might Guy embodies the message of Naruto more than any of the characters in Naruto not named Rock Lee, Might Guy didn't get to kill the main bad guy because he's not one of the main characters. And thus, let's get to talking about those main characters, because coming up at number 2 on our list, ranking the strongest jutsus in Naruto that were only ever used once, we have the Six Paths Ultra Big Ball Rasen Shuriken, aka the Rasen Shuriken that Naruto used in the right 3 hands of his 6-armed, 27-tailed Kurama chakra construct that he used to fight against 9-tailed, 10 tails Sasuke. Too many words. See, in order to pull off this jutsu, Naruto not only needs access to the Six Paths chakra that he got from Hagoromo, but also needs to make 2 full copies of himself that are using Kurama's chakra mode, and then fuse both of those 2 copies with himself to make the 6-armed, 27-tailed Kurama chakra mode that also has 3 faces, and then using 3 of those 6 arms, create an ultra big ball Rasen Shuriken that's the size of a tailed beast ball, and fuse it with Six Paths chakra, and then add shape transformation to it to turn it into a Rasen Shuriken. And then, and only then, when Naruto has done all of that, can Naruto hurl a Rasen Shuriken alongside a tailed beast Rasen Shuriken, which unfortunately for the circumstance of this list he has used multiple times, at Sasuke's strongest offensive technique. But since we're talking about Sasuke's strongest offensive technique, we should talk about our number 1 entry on this list, because as much as it pains me, coming up at number 1 on our list, ranking the strongest jutsus in Naruto that have only ever been used once, we have Indra's Arrow. Listen, both Naruto's tailed beast Rasen Shuriken and his Six Paths Ultra Big Ball Rasen Shuriken could eviscerate entire villages, maybe entire countries with one throw. We saw Naruto using some variation of these Rasen Shurikens in the battle against 3 Rinnegan Madara to destroy meteorites that Madara were controlling that were near 20 kilometers wide. And outside of the fact that Naruto was able to destroy something that was 20 kilometers wide, the force of these jutsus also had to counteract the kinetic energy of a meteor falling from space that is 20 kilometers wide, which are all bigger than the meteors that killed the dinosaur. And Naruto destroyed like 12 of them. However, you know what destroyed both the tailed beast Rasen Shuriken and a Six Paths Ultra Big Ball Rasen Shuriken simultaneously? Sasuke's Indra's Arrow. And considering the fact that lightning release is canonically weak to wind release, that means that Sasuke was also operating at a disadvantage. And yet the offensive firepower of Indra's Arrow was able to counteract 2 separate wind release based techniques. Now this makes sense when you consider the fact that this technique was channeled through the power of 9-tailed beasts, 8.5-tailed beasts, and was the product of a perfect completed Susanoo literally grabbing lightning for an arrow. However, fortunately for all the Otsutsuki that Sasuke had to fight after his fight against Naruto, Sasuke is no longer able to use this jutsu on account of the fact that he no longer has 8.5-tailed beasts locked up in Pokeballs floating around him. And thus, it'll most likely never be seen again, just like the rest of these jutsus. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. Out of all the jutsus that we've seen in Naruto, only ever used once, which is your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, there's a Chinese hot spring calling my name.